Ambassador Kethvar had always prided himself on pragmatic solutions to impossible problems. 3 years ago, when the Vorthak collective demanded their pound of flesh, literally, in their charming cultural idiom, he'd delivered exactly what the situation required. One expendable human attaché in exchange for ending 2 centuries of border skirmishes. Clean, efficient, brilliant, really. Now, staring at the holographic display showing 17 trade routes mysteriously disrupted across 3 sectors, he was beginning to suspect the universe had developed a sense of irony. "Sir?" His aide Velmthar shifted nervously, her chitinous carapace clicking against the marble floor. "The Nexus Prime Shipping Consortium has filed another complaint. Their entire supply chain through the Helix corridor has vanished." Vanished? Kethvar's 4 eyes focused independently on different sections of the display. "Ships don't vanish, Velmthar. They get hijacked, destroyed, or redirected. Which is it?" That's the peculiar part. According to their manifests, the ships reached their destinations. The cargo was delivered, but somehow none of it arrived where it was supposed to go. Kethvar rubbed his temples with 2 of his 6 hands, while the other 4 continued manipulating data streams. Trilaxians had evolved for multitasking, but this situation was testing even his species' legendary capacity for simultaneous problem-solving. And the Kepler Mining Guild? Same pattern. 17 different delivery points, all confirmed successful by automated systems, but the receiving stations report empty holds. Velmthar's mandibles twitched, a sign of acute stress among her people. "Sir, there's something else. The pattern analysis suggests coordination. Coordination requires intelligence. Intelligence requires motivation." Kethvar's primary hand steepled while his secondary pair continued scrolling through incident reports. "Who benefits from disrupting these specific trade routes? That's what troubles me. These routes serve completely different political and economic interests. Disrupting them creates chaos, not advantage." Kethvar paused. In his experience, chaos always served someone's advantage. The trick was identifying whose. He'd built his career on understanding the motivations of beings who thought in patterns alien to Trilaxian logic. The hegemony's expansion had been possible precisely because he could predict how other species would react to pressure, negotiation, and carefully applied leverage. "Tell me about the Chen situation again," he said, surprising himself. Velmthar's carapace darkened, the equivalent of a raised eyebrow. "Sir, the human exchange was 3 years ago. Surely that's not relevant to current shipping." "Humor me." The Vorthaks demanded a cultural liaison as part of the peace accords. "You selected the human attaché because," she hesitated, "because humans were new, expendable, and politically insignificant." Kethvar finished. "Say it, Velmthar. I made that calculation deliberately." "Yes, sir. Zara Chen was transferred to Vorthak custody as a gesture of good faith. The peace treaty was ratified immediately afterward, and we never heard from her again. Standard procedure for cultural exchanges, particularly with the collective. They prefer isolation for their guests." Kethvar's secondary hands stopped scrolling. Something about the phrasing bothered him, though he couldn't identify what. The human had been a minor diplomatic functionary, barely 8 months into her first galactic posting. Her species had only joined the broader community 8 years ago, emerging from their single-sector isolation with the social grace of adolescence and the technological sophistication to match. The Vorthaks accepted her without complaint. Actually, they seemed pleased. Their negotiator mentioned something about humans having interesting potential for cultural adaptation. Meaning? Standard Vorthak rhetoric. about species optimization through hierarchical integration. Kethvar's primary mind began connecting patterns while his secondary consciousness continued analyzing trade data. The Vorthak collective operated on rigid social stratification. Everything was about position, precedent, and proper protocol. They'd wanted a hostage, not a cultural exchange, regardless of the diplomatic language. So why had they been pleased to receive a human? "Sir?" Velminthor's voice carried a note of urgency. "I'm receiving reports of similar disruptions in the spiral arm markets. Same pattern, successful deliveries to nowhere." The ambassador's 4 eyes converged on his aide. "How many species are affected?" "All of them. Every major trade partner in 3 sectors." She paused, mandibles clicking rapidly. "Sir, this level of coordination would require someone with intimate knowledge of multiple shipping networks, currency exchange protocols, and interspecies commercial law. Someone with access to restricted databases and classified routing information. Yes, but also someone with the cultural knowledge to navigate 17 different species' bureaucratic systems simultaneously." Kethvar felt something cold settle in his primary stomach. Humans had one trait that other species found either amusing or irritating, depending on context. They were relentlessly social. Where other species maintained careful boundaries between cultural groups, humans seemed constitutionally incapable of respecting such distinctions. They formed connections across species lines with the same casual ease they might form connections within their own groups. He'd considered it a weakness when selecting Chen for the exchange. A human would be more likely to cooperate with Vorthar authorities, more likely to adapt to captivity, more likely to accept whatever fate awaited cultural hostages in collective custody. "Velmthar," he said slowly, "get me a comprehensive report on every known cultural exchange in the past 3 years. I want to know who went where and what happened to them afterward." Just do it, and cross-reference those locations with our disruption patterns." As his aide scurried away, Kethvar stared at the holographic chaos spreading across 3 sectors of space. He'd solved an impossible diplomatic problem 3 years ago by sacrificing one insignificant human for the greater good of galactic peace. Now he was beginning to wonder who exactly had been sacrificed. War leader Thokmar had conquered 14 star systems, personally executed 23 rivals, and maintained absolute control over the Vorthak collective for 37 years. He had never, in his considerable experience, encountered a problem quite like the human female sitting across from his strategy table, calmly explaining why his latest territorial expansion violated Collective Mandate 847b. "The precedent is clear," she said, her voice carrying the sort of confidence that usually preceded someone's painful death. Sub-Commander Veltok's claim to the Omega Drift mining rights directly contradicts the resource allocation hierarchy established during the Ninth Reorganization. "The Ninth Reorganization occurred 400 years ago," Thokmar growled, his massive frame bristling with barely contained violence, "before your species discovered fire. Which makes it an even stronger precedent, doesn't it? The older the ruling, the more weight it carries in collective law." Fleet Admiral Corvesh shifted uncomfortably in her carapace. "War leader, perhaps we should consider—" "Consider what?" Thokmar's secondary jaw unhinged slightly. "This creature arrived as a hostage 3 years ago. Now she's quoting legal precedents like she wrote them herself." "I did write some of them," the human said mildly. "Your administrative staff was remarkably accommodating when I offered to help update the legal database. Apparently, organizing complex hierarchical systems is something humans excel at." Corvesh made a sound that might have been choking. You mean the complete overhaul of our judicial review process last year? The one that improved case resolution time by 63% while reducing appeals by half? Yes, that was mine. Thokmar stared at the female human with something approaching disbelief. She barely reached the height of his knee, possessed no natural weapons, and couldn't survive 5 minutes in collective military training. Yet somehow she'd managed to restructure fundamental aspects of their society with the casual ease of someone reorganizing a storage closet. "You're supposed to be demonstrating human cultural adaptation," he said slowly, "not rewriting our legal framework. I am adapting. Your culture values efficiency and proper hierarchy. I simply helped you achieve both more effectively." She gestured to a holographic display showing resource distribution charts. "Your current expansion plan violates 17 different precedents and will result in civil challenges from 6 different fleet commanders." "Civil challenges?" Corvesh leaned forward. "That's impossible. The collective doesn't permit." Article 23 of the Military Cooperation Codex, established during the 5th reorganization. Any territorial claim that potentially disadvantages existing resource allocation can be formally disputed through the chain of resolution process. The human's expression remained perfectly neutral. "I helped draft the updated procedures last month." The silence that followed was pregnant with implications. Thokmar had built his power base on the assumption that collective law was too complex and contradictory for anyone to navigate effectively. That ambiguity allowed him to make decisions based on personal preference rather than legal precedent. "Explain to me," he said very quietly, "how a species that's been in space for less than a decade understands our legal system better than beings who created it." "You didn't create it. You inherited it from 7 different predecessor civilizations, then spent centuries layering new rules on top without removing the old ones." She pulled up another display. "Your legal framework is basically an archaeological dig site. Humans love that sort of puzzle." "Puzzle?" Corvesh's voice pitched higher. "Pattern recognition and systematic organization. We're very good at finding order in chaos." The human smiled. "Which is convenient, because your society is remarkably chaotic for something that claims to value hierarchy." Thokmar felt something unfamiliar crawling up his spine. Something that might have been fear. "What do you want?" "Nothing you weren't already planning to give me. Cultural exchange, remember? I'm learning about collective society while helping you optimize its function." Her smile widened slightly. "Though I should mention that 47 fleet commanders have filed formal petitions requesting permanent assignment to my Administrative Oversight Committee." "Your what?" "It started as a voluntary efficiency review program. Now it's apparently the fastest growing department in the collective bureaucracy." She gestured casually. "Turns out, once you organize the legal framework properly, a lot of previously impossible things become remarkably straightforward." Corvesh was making that choking sound again. "War leader, if she's right about the territorial expansion violations." "I am right. Would you like me to demonstrate by filing the challenges myself?" The war leader of the Vorthak collective, conqueror of systems and commander of fleets, found himself in the utterly unprecedented position of being outmaneuvered by someone who wasn't even trying to fight him. "Human," he said finally, "what do you call someone who reorganizes an entire civilization from the inside out?" "Efficient." She gathered her data tablets with practiced ease. "Oh, and Thokmar? That expansion plan? I've already prepared an alternative that increases resource yield by 30% while satisfying all existing legal requirements. Your subordinates seem quite eager to implement it." As she left, Thokmar turned to his fleet admiral. Korpesh, we may have made a mistake. What kind of mistake? The kind where we asked for a hostage and accidentally acquired a consultant. Captain Zextai had smuggled contraband across 47 different jurisdictions, bribed officials in 12 languages, and maintained profitable relationships with species that considered his own people a delicacy. What he'd never done was sit in a cantina on Freehaven Station, listening to a Cathari spice trader explain economic theory to a Saurian weapons dealer while a Trilaxian bureaucrat took notes. "You're missing the bigger picture," Zara was saying, her crystalline form refracting the bar's neon lighting into rainbow patterns. "These aren't random supply disruptions. Someone's redirecting entire cargo manifests." "Impossible," grunted Skelemuth, his reptilian features twisted in skepticism. "You'd need access codes for a dozen different shipping networks. And cultural knowledge for twice as many species, commercial protocols," added the Trilaxian, some mid-level functionary named Vorthak. "The paperwork alone would require a human," Zara finished. The table went quiet. Even in Freehaven's perpetual din of alien voices and mechanical noise, the silence felt pronounced. Zextai leaned forward, his tentacles curling around his drink. "You're suggesting one human is orchestrating supply chain manipulation across multiple sectors." "I'm not suggesting anything. I'm telling you what I've seen." Zara projected a holographic display from her internal processors. "Look at these trade routes. 6 months ago, my spice shipments to Vorthak space started getting optimized. How? Better prices, faster delivery, improved quality control. My profit margins increased 40%. Her form shimmered with what might have been confusion. "I assumed it was collective efficiency improvements." Skelmoth's eyes narrowed. "The Vorthaks don't improve anything. They conquer it, strip it, and move on." "Exactly. Which is why I started investigating." She manipulated the display showing shipping records. "The optimization orders came from someone with administrative authority in the collective legal framework. Someone who understood both Cathari commercial requirements and Vorthak bureaucratic procedures." "That's impossible," Vorthak interjected. "Those systems are completely incompatible. Cathari commerce operates on collaborative profit sharing, while Vorthak trade functions through hierarchical resource allocation. No one understands both." "Humans do." The voice came from behind them. They turned to see a figure in a worn pilot's jacket. Another human, this one male, with the kind of weathered expression that suggested extensive experience with cosmic irony. "Mind if I join this fascinating conversation?" he asked, already sliding into an empty chair. "Name's Marcus Webb. I've been tracking these same patterns for 2 months." Zextai studied the newcomer. "You're far from Earth, human." "Aren't we all far from something?" Webb signaled the bartender. "The thing about humans is we don't really have a home system mentality. We adapt to wherever we end up." "Like your colleague in Vorthak space?" Zara asked. "Zara? She's not my colleague. We've never met, but I've been following her work." Webb's drink arrived, something blue and volatile. "She's building something remarkable." "Which is?" "A network. Not a criminal organization or a trading consortium. Something bigger." He gestured to the cantina around them. "Look at this place. Freehaven Station exists because dozens of species need neutral territory for commerce. But it's still chaos. Everyone operating according to their own rules, creating friction and inefficiency." Skelmoth's claws tapped impatiently on the table. "Your point?" "Zara's not just optimizing individual trade routes. She's creating compatibility layers between incompatible systems." Webb pulled out a datapad. I've traced her influence across 17 different species commercial networks. Each one thinks they're getting better service from their traditional partners. But they're actually getting better service from her coordination, Vorthak said slowly. Exactly. She's become the universal translator for galactic commerce. Not through conquest or replacement, but through integration. Zextai felt his smuggler's instincts tingling. What's her profit model? That's the beautiful part. There isn't one. At least, not in any way we'd recognize. Weber smiled. She's not extracting value. She's creating it by reducing systemic friction. Nobody does that for free, Skellen growled. Humans might. We have this weird tendency to fix broken systems just because they're broken. Webb finished his drink. But in this case, I think she's building political capital. For what? Ever notice how the species with the most efficient trade relationships tend to avoid going to war with each other? Webb stood up. Zara's not just optimizing commerce, she's creating interdependence. Zara's form brightened with understanding. Economic warfare. Economic peace, Webb corrected. Much more dangerous, from certain perspectives. As the human pilot walked away, the remaining aliens stared at each other with dawning comprehension. Geltok, Zextai said finally, you mentioned this level of coordination would require someone with access to classified routing information. Yes. Where would someone get that kind of access? The Trilaxian's color shifted to a pale green. From someone who works in diplomatic services, someone with legitimate clearance for interspecies commercial protocols. Someone like a cultural attaché? Exactly like a cultural attaché. They sat in silence, contemplating the implications. Somewhere in Vorthak space, a human hostage was quietly rebuilding the economic foundations of galactic civilization. And apparently, she was just getting started. The dissolution of the Trilaxian Vorthak peace accord happened with all the ceremony of a bureaucratic memo. Kethvar received the official notification at 8:47 Standard Time, filed in triplicate through proper diplomatic channels, citing irreconcilable differences in territorial administration methodology. What the memo didn't mention was that 12 other major treaties had dissolved simultaneously, or that 43 trade partnerships had restructured overnight, or that the entire political landscape of 3 sectors had rearranged itself like pieces on a cosmic chessboard. Sir, Velmthar announced, her voice tight with professional panic. We're receiving a priority transmission from everywhere. Kethvar looked up from his desk, where 17 different species ambassadors were demanding explanations for events he didn't understand. Everywhere? Every major trade hub, diplomatic station, and commercial center in known space. It's the same message, broadcast simultaneously. Put it through. The holographic display activated, revealing a simple conference room with neutral gray walls. A human woman sat at a modest desk, her appearance unremarkable, except for the absolute confidence in her posture. She wore no insignia, carried no titles, but somehow commanded the frame like she owned the galaxy. Ambassador Kethvar, she said, as if continuing a conversation they'd been having for years. I thought you might appreciate an explanation. Kethvar's 4 eyes focused with predatory intensity. Zara Chen, you're supposed to be dead. I'm supposed to be many things. Compliant, grateful, forgotten. She smiled. Humans have a saying about assumptions. They make fools of everyone involved. You've destroyed everything we built. I've improved everything you broke. She gestured to something off-screen. The Trilaxian hegemony expanded through conquest and exploitation. The Vorthak collective maintained power through intimidation and isolation. Both systems were fundamentally unstable. They were stable enough to maintain peace for 3 years. They maintained the absence of open warfare. That's not the same thing as peace. Her expression didn't change, but something predatory flickered behind her eyes. Real peace requires trust. Trust requires mutual benefit. Mutual benefit requires someone willing to build bridges instead of walls. Velmthar whispered urgently in Kethvar's ear. He listened, his skin shifting to a sickly yellow. My aide informs me that 17 different species have formally requested human mediation for their territorial disputes. 18, actually. The Kepler Mining Guild just filed their request. Zara consulted a datapad with casual efficiency. It seems word has spread about our success rate. Your success rate? 100% resolution of interspecies commercial disputes. 0 military conflicts among participating trade networks. 43% average increase in cross-species economic activity. She set the pad aside. Turns out, when you remove artificial barriers to cooperation, beings tend to cooperate. Kethvar felt the familiar cold sensation in his primary stomach, but now it was accompanied by something much worse. Recognition. You orchestrated this entire situation. I optimized it. There's a difference. You manipulated me into selecting you for the exchange. I provided you with sufficient information to make the decision you were already inclined to make. Her smile turned sharp. You chose me because you assumed humans were weak, naive, and expendable. I simply failed to correct your assumptions. This is impossible. One being cannot reshape galactic political structures. No being can't. But I haven't been working alone. The display shifted, showing a network diagram that made Kethvar's vision blur. Did you know there are over 200 humans currently serving in various diplomatic, administrative, and commercial positions across 47 different species territories? That's comprehensive. Yes, we're remarkably good at getting jobs, especially in positions other species consider tedious or unimportant. She leaned forward. Cultural attachés, trade liaisons, administrative assistants, systems analysts. All those boring, expendable positions that actually keep civilizations functioning. Velmthar made a strangled sound. The entire galactic infrastructure is run by the species everyone assumes is too primitive to matter. Yes. Zara's expression remained perfectly pleasant. We've been optimizing your systems from the inside for 8 years. You've just been too focused on military power to notice economic revolution. The weight of it crashed over Kethvar like a collapsing star. Not just one human, but hundreds. Not just one species adapting to galactic society, but galactic society being quietly, systematically restructured to human specifications. What do you want? He asked, echoing Thokmar's earlier question. She did not want to betray Agenpa. I have always wanted. For betrayal to have consequences. Perhaps you failed. She stood up. You sacrificed me for political convenience. The transmission ended. Kethvar sat in silence, contemplating the ruins of everything he'd thought he understood about power, politics, and the supposedly primitive species from a small blue planet. Sir, Velmthar ventured, what do we do now? Kethvar looked at his aide, then at the 17 different diplomatic crises demanding his attention, then at the reports of human-mediated trade agreements spreading across known space like a benevolent plague. We adapt, he said finally. Apparently, that's what everyone else is doing. Outside his window, the galaxy continued its ancient dance of commerce and conflict, now choreographed by beings who understood that true power wasn't about who could destroy civilizations, but who could connect them.